time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
Prince Harry expected a private answer. What he received was a royal finality that left him speechless. Balmoral had always been more than stone, land, and memory. It was childhood, grief, duty, and belonging. But when Prince William confirmed the final decision about Harry's access, the silence that followed said more than any public statement ever could. A family wound had become a royal boundary. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry did not answer at first. The words had reached him, but they had not yet settled. He held the phone close, listening to William speak with the kind of calm that made the message feel even colder. There was no shouting, no dramatic threat, no emotional escape, just a sentence that cut through years of history. His unrestricted private access to Balmoral had been revoked, and any future visit would need approval through the Prince of Wales's office. William kept his voice steady, but the prince knew steady did not mean painless. The Prince of Wales's office, in plain terms, was the formal team managing William's royal duties, decisions, and official permissions. That meant Harry was no longer being treated as someone who could simply arrive through old family understanding. He would now have to ask. He would have to wait. He would have to be approved. And for a man who had once walked those grounds as a grandson, a son, and a brother, that change landed like exile. Balmoral carried too much memory to feel like an ordinary residence. The estate was the royal family's private Scottish retreat, a place tied to summer gatherings, private conversations, and the Queen's final chapter. The Queen had spent some of her most personal days there, and the monarch's memory still seemed to sit over every family decision connected to that place. For Harry, that made the decision sharper. For William, it made the protection of Balmoral feel heavier. Harry finally tried to speak, but his answer came broken. He asked if the decision was final, and William paused, just long enough for the silence to become its own response. Then the future king confirmed it. The order was not temporary. It was not a warning. It was already active. William did not call it punishment. He framed it as protection. Trust had become fragile. Privacy had become precious. Security had become impossible to separate from family wounds. Before the call, a sealed Balmoral access note had been placed on the prince's desk, proving the decision had been prepared long before Harry heard it. Someone had studied the matter. Someone had written it down. Someone had decided the old way could not continue. Harry heard the final words and said almost nothing. The man who had built a life on speaking out now found himself unable to reply. William ended the call with restraint, but that restraint carried grief. The prince had not only delivered an order, he had closed a gate between brothers. But before the silence on that call, there were people, wounds, and loyalties already standing on opposite sides of the same locked gate. No royal decision wounds only one person. When William closed the path to Balmoral, the impact moved through the family like a hidden shockwave. Harry felt rejected. Charles felt torn. Catherine watched William carry the burden of authority. Camilla understood the politics of exclusion better than anyone. And behind every measured palace phrase, there was something far more human. A family deciding who still belonged inside its safest walls. William knew this was no longer just about Harry. The prince had stepped into a role that demanded more than brotherly feeling. He was now acting as the future king, the person expected to protect royal spaces before damage reached the crown itself. Balmoral mattered because it was not only a house in Scotland, it was the family's private royal retreat, a place used for rest, memory, and quiet decisions far away from public pressure. To touch access, there was to touch the deepest nerve in the family. Harry felt that nerve immediately. He did not see Balmoral as a privilege written on paper. He saw it as part of his childhood, part of his grandmother's memory, part of the life he once believed could never be taken from him. The prince had drawn a line, but Harry felt it as rejection. He was still a son. He was still a brother. Yet the new order made him feel like a visitor, waiting outside a door he once opened without thinking. Charles read the decision brief alone and did not speak. The decision brief was a written summary explaining what had been decided, why it mattered, and how the palace should carry it out. The king placed it flat on the table, his hand resting near the edge, and stayed silent for several seconds. He understood why William had acted. He also understood what Harry would hear beneath the words. Not security, not procedure, loss. Catherine saw the change in William before anyone else did. The princess watched his face harden before the announcement, and she knew this was not cold ambition. It was pain wearing the mask of control. William had won authority, but he had not won peace. Catherine understood that a family boundary can protect one side while breaking the other. She stayed close to him, not to push the decision, but to steady the man who had to deliver it. Camilla sensed the deeper danger quickly. The queen consort knew Balmoral access was now connected to a larger question. Who could still be trusted inside private royal life? She had lived long enough inside palace walls to know that exclusion never begins with the door. It begins with doubt. And once doubt enters a royal household, it spreads quietly, touching names, rooms, schedules, and memories. A senior aide made the change real. The aide removed Harry's name from an internal Balmoral visitor category, a private list used to guide staff on who could enter under family access and who required approval. That small act carried enormous weight. Harry was no longer inside the old circle. William's decision was already active before the wider family had even finished absorbing it. One person knew exactly what had pushed the prince this far. One person remembered the moment at Balmoral that made trust collapse behind closed doors. And to understand why William would go this far, the story must return to the single moment that turned suspicion into action. Every royal rupture has a point of no return. For William and Harry, it was not a shouted argument in London or a headline across the world. It was a private moment inside Balmoral, during what should have been a quiet family weekend. One conversation, one closed door, and one overheard exchange changed everything. After that, William no longer saw Balmoral as neutral ground. Harry arrived carrying more than luggage. He carried old hurt, old questions, and the quiet anger of a man who felt decisions were being made around him instead of with him. The private Balmoral weekend had been arranged after months of strained communication, and the plan was simple: bring the brothers into the same family space and let the pressure drop. Balmoral, the royal family's private Scottish retreat, mattered because it had always been where public masks came off and family wounds were supposed to soften. Charles wanted peace badly enough to believe it could still happen. The king hoped William and Harry could speak without cameras, staff pressure, or the noise of public opinion. He knew the brothers had become symbols to the world, but to him they were still sons. That was why the weekend mattered. If Balmoral could not bring them back into the same emotional room, then perhaps no place could. Harry chose the wrong moment to confront William, or perhaps the only moment left. In a side room away from the family, he asked the prince why he was being erased from private decisions. His voice carried pain, but pain quickly turned sharp. William listened at first, controlled and still. Then the future king warned him that Balmoral could not become another battlefield. Not this place. Not the one place still tied to the queen's memory. The words changed the air between them. Harry heard rejection, where William meant warning. The prince heard pressure, where his brother meant desperation. Neither man raised his voice for long, but the coldness between them did more damage than shouting could have done. Harry wanted to be seen as family. William wanted to protect the family from another private fracture becoming public. Then came the moment everyone later remembered in whispers: the library corridor exchange. This was the specific incident that turned concern into action. The exchange meant a tense conversation near Balmoral's library corridor. where private family movement and guest records were later discussed. Harry was overheard questioning whether Balmoral's private guest records could be challenged through family channels, and the sentence landed like a spark in dry grass. A courtier later described the moment in a documented household account prepared for senior staff. The courtier said, "William left the corridor pale, closed the library door behind him, and asked for the estate access files." Estate access files were internal records showing who could enter certain private areas, when they could stay, and under what authority. Once the prince requested them, the old family trust had already begun to shift into formal control. William did not speak of revenge. He spoke of risk. Harry did not speak of betrayal. He spoke of being pushed outside. But both brothers knew something had changed. The library corridor exchange became the quiet foundation for everything that followed. Because after that day, Balmoral was no longer just a place of memory. It became evidence. What began as a private warning in a corridor soon demanded a face-to-face reckoning between two brothers who could no longer hide behind memory. When Harry finally stood before William, the room carried years of unfinished anger. There were no crowds, no microphones, no smiling family photographs to soften the blow. Just two brothers facing the truth neither wanted to say aloud. William had made his decision. Harry wanted a reason. And somewhere between duty and blood, Balmoral became the place where brotherhood met the cold edge of command. Harry entered expecting a conversation, not a sentence. The private meeting had been arranged at Windsor, away from public faces and away from palace noise. Windsor mattered because it was one of the monarchy's strongest family seats, a place where private decisions often carried public consequences later. After the first formal greeting, the aides left. That silence mattered too, because it meant no one could soften the words, interrupt the pain, or carry blame for either brother. William arrived with the Balmoral access folder under his control. The folder was a collection of papers tied to who could enter the royal family's private Scottish retreat, when they could stay, and who had the power to approve it. Harry saw it immediately and understood the meaning before a word was spoken. The prince had not come only as a brother. He had come as the future king, carrying the authority of the crown. Harry tried to stay calm, but the hurt rose faster than his pride could hold it down. He asked whether he was now being treated like an outsider. His voice tightened on the word family, and for a moment, even William looked away. The question was simple, but the wound behind it was not. Harry was asking if blood still mattered. He was asking if memory still counted. He was asking whether Balmoral had become a place he had to earn. William answered quietly, and that made it worse. The prince said family access requires family trust. The sentence landed like a door closing. Harry stared at him, stunned by how final it sounded. William did not shout. He did not move toward anger. He simply held the line, and the line was brutal, because it left no room for old excuses. The folder became the center of the room. William set it down, but when Harry reached for one page, the prince stopped him. That single refusal revealed more than any speech could. One confidential page remained hidden, and that meant deeper concerns were still being protected. A confidential page, in plain terms, was a private document only certain senior figures could read, because it contained sensitive family or security details. Harry understood then that the decision had roots he had not been allowed to see. Harry noticed something else before the folder closed. Catherine's handwritten note was attached near the front, short and careful, but impossible to ignore. The princess had not issued the order, yet her presence on the file told him William had not carried the emotional weight alone. Catherine had seen the cost. She had stood beside the future king before he walked into this room. William did not enjoy the power he held. Harry did not accept the wound he had been given. But both brothers understood the balance had changed. The confrontation proved the prince had authority now, and authority did not bend just because the pain came from family. Because behind William's final words, stood a machinery of monarchy that had already decided Balmoral could no longer be left exposed. A royal gate does not close by accident. It closes because someone signs, someone agrees, and someone accepts the cost. William may have confirmed the final decision, but behind him stood advisors, family memory, private security fears, and the heavy shadow of the crown. Yet the most powerful moment was not official. It was Charles, alone with the file, realizing his sons had reached a place he could not repair. Charles read the recommendation slowly, then removed his glasses and placed them beside the papers. The recommendation was a formal written advice given to the monarch or senior royals before a major decision, explaining what action should be taken and why. The king understood every line. William's authority came from more than being Harry's brother now. The prince was carrying the future weight of the monarchy, and sensitive family access had become part of that burden. William had not asked for an easy power. The future king knew Balmoral was not just another royal address. It was a private royal refuge, meaning a protected family place, where the monarchy could step away from cameras, public duties, and outside pressure. That mattered, because privacy had become rare. Every room carried memory. Every visit carried risk. Every name allowed inside said something about trust. Charles looked at the final page and admitted the truth in a low voice. The decision might protect the crown, but it would wound his son. The crown, in simple words, meant the monarchy as an institution, not just the person wearing the title of king. Charles had spent years trying to hold fatherhood and duty in the same hand. Now one was cutting into the other. Harry would not hear protection. He would hear rejection. Camilla watched Charles withdraw into silence. The queen consort knew that silence had become his way of grieving, and she did not rush to fill it. She had seen palace decisions break people before. She had also seen what happens when private weakness becomes public crisis. Camilla understood why William had moved carefully, but she also understood why the king looked older after reading the file. William's office made the decision practical. The prince's team quietly created a new approval channel, a formal route meaning Harry could no longer use old family arrangements to enter Balmoral freely. The change covered private apartments, family records rooms, and informal stays. It was not limited to public ceremonies or planned royal events. That detail mattered most, because it touched the parts of royal life that had once depended on trust instead of permission. Harry's name had not vanished, but his freedom had. William had not slammed the door in anger. The future king had changed the lock with paperwork, restraint, and painful control. Charles knew the difference, and so did Camilla. The king saw protection. The queen consort saw consequence. The prince saw duty. But Harry would soon see only the one thing no palace phrase could soften. The monarchy had made its choice on paper, but Harry would feel its force only when the new reality reached him in the most personal way. The first consequence was not public humiliation. It was a private pause. Harry sat with the news, staring at a message that turned childhood memory into controlled access. Balmoral had been the place where he once ran freely, where family felt distant from the world. Now every future step would require approval, and for the first time, he understood that William's decision was not a warning. It was already in force. Harry read the written confirmation twice. The message said any future Balmoral visit had to be requested in advance through formal channels. Formal channels meant the official route used by palace staff to approve royal plans, visits, and permissions, instead of allowing private family arrangements. That one phrase changed everything. Harry was no longer being treated as a private family guest who could arrive through memory and blood. He had become a conditional visitor, someone whose presence needed approval before the gate could open. Meghan watched his face before she asked the question. She saw disbelief first, then humiliation, then something quieter and more painful. Harry lowered the phone and did not answer her right away. The silence frightened her more than anger would have. Meghan had seen him wounded by headlines, titles, and public judgment, but this was different. Balmoral was not a ceremony. It was not a balcony. It was part of who he had been before the world began choosing sides. Harry finally told her what the message said. His voice stayed low, but the damage was clear. Meghan understood at once why the words had struck so deeply. A title could be debated. A role could be changed. But access to a place filled with family memory felt personal in a way no official statement could soften. Harry had lost something invisible, and that made it harder to defend. The next blow came quickly. A planned quiet visit, tied to a family anniversary, was placed under review. That meant the visit was no longer assumed or accepted. It had to be checked, discussed, and approved before it could happen. Harry stared at that detail as if it belonged to someone else's life. The anniversary mattered because it was connected to grief and remembrance, not power. Yet even grief now had to pass through permission. Harry then learned that Balmoral staff had already been briefed. Staff briefing meant workers at the estate had been told what instruction to follow if he requested access or appeared under old family expectations. That detail made the decision feel brutally real. William's order had moved beyond private words. The prince's decision now lived in instructions, lists, and quiet conversations among people who once would have simply welcomed him. Meghan saw the humiliation settle on him. She reached for calm, but Harry stayed distant. He was not only angry at William, he was stunned by how complete the change felt. The future king had not just spoken, he had acted. And every action told Harry the same thing. The old path to Balmoral was gone. But just when the decision seemed impossible to soften, one private conversation changed the emotional direction of the story. The turning point did not come from lawyers, aides, or palace offices. It came from two people speaking plainly when the institution finally stepped aside. After the anger came the silence. And inside that silence, William and Harry faced something neither policy nor protocol could fully explain: grief. Balmoral was not just access. It was their grandmother. It was childhood. It was the last place where some memories still felt untouched. When the brothers spoke privately again, without aides and without royal language, the decision did not change, but its meaning did. William agreed to speak one final time, because he knew Harry deserved more than paperwork. The prince did not enter that conversation to renegotiate the order. He entered to explain the heart behind it. The institutional buffer was gone now, meaning there were no aides, no palace officials, and no formal voices standing between the brothers. That mattered because every earlier step had sounded official. This time, the pain had to be spoken plainly. Harry did not begin with anger. He began with loss. He told William that losing free access to Balmoral felt like losing another piece of his mother, his grandmother, and the life he once belonged to without asking. The word free mattered because it meant more than movement. It meant trust. It meant being known. It meant walking into a family place without feeling measured at the door. William listened, and for once, he did not answer quickly. The future king understood that Harry was not only fighting for a house in Scotland, he was fighting for proof that the past still counted. Balmoral carried the Queen's memory in a way no palace statement could explain. The Queen had made that place feel private, protected, and human. For both brothers, her absence made every decision around the estate feel heavier. William then confessed the truth he had kept buried under control. He said protecting Balmoral felt like protecting the last place where the family could still breathe. The prince explained that the decision was never designed to erase Harry completely. It was designed to limit access until trust could be rebuilt. Limit, in this context, meant reducing freedom without fully removing the possibility of future visits. That difference mattered, even if it still hurt. Harry heard the words, and something inside him shifted. He did not forgive the decision in that moment. He did not accept it easily. But he finally understood that the wound was not only punishment, it was consequence. Broken trust had created a new kind of distance, and Balmoral had become the place where that distance could no longer be hidden. William looked less like a victor than a man carrying a burden. Harry looked less like a rebel than a son trying to hold on to what remained. The brothers had reached a painful truth. Love may explain the past, but trust controls the future. Balmoral was still part of Harry's story, but it could no longer be entered on memory alone. The private emotional shift could not stay hidden for long. What the brothers understood in silence, the world would soon judge in public, and the reaction was impossible for the palace to control. By morning, Balmoral was no longer just a family residence. It became a symbol. Across Britain and beyond, people saw the decision as a royal exile, wrapped in palace language. Some called it necessary, others called it cruel. But one image captured the mood. A newspaper front page showing Balmoral's gates, under a grey sky, with one word stretched across the top, locked. Harry saw the front page before anyone around him could soften it. The formal restriction had moved from palace paperwork into public debate, and that changed the pain completely. A formal restriction meant an official limit placed on what he could do, not just a private family request. That mattered, because the world no longer saw this as a quiet family boundary. The world saw it as a royal message, and Harry was forced to watch strangers judge the most personal door in his life. William saw the same coverage, and felt the blow in a different way. The prince had expected criticism, but he had not expected the decision to be reduced to cruelty. Broadcasters framed the story as a battle between royal duty and brotherly pain. Royal duty, in plain words, meant the responsibility to protect the monarchy even when personal feelings suffer. William believed he had acted to protect the family, yet now millions were asking whether protection had turned into punishment. Harry stayed silent as the coverage played. He did not defend himself. He did not attack William. He simply watched his private loss become public judgment. That silence mattered, because he had been known for speaking when wounded, but this time the wound seemed too deep for fast words. Balmoral had become more than access. It had become proof, in the eyes of the public, that the distance between the brothers was no longer temporary. William carried his own silence. The future king knew silence could look cold, but he also knew explaining too much would expose the family even further. The prince had chosen restraint, and restraint now made him look harder than he felt. Success had given him authority. Suffering had given him the cost of using it. Then came the public moment the palace could not ignore. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates, arguing quietly but firmly about whether Balmoral should remain sacred or forgiving. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's official London residence, mattered because public feeling often gathers there when royal decisions become national arguments. Some people said Harry had lost trust. Others said William had gone too far. The crowd was not large, but the mood was sharp. A commentator gave the line that traveled fastest. During a recorded morning broadcast, he said, "This is not just a locked gate. This is the monarchy choosing order over sentiment." The words stung because they sounded simple, but they carried the whole conflict. Order protected the crown. Sentiment remembered the boy Harry had been. And somewhere between those two truths, Balmoral became the symbol of a family that could love and still limit. Charles heard the phrase later and understood why it hurt. The king knew the crown had survived by making hard choices, but he also knew every hard choice left someone behind. Harry had become the face of exile. William had become the face of control, and the monarchy had become the judge of both. Public reaction forced the final question into the open. What did this decision truly mean for Harry, William, and the crown? And when the noise finally settled, the answer was not found in headlines, but in the emotional verdict left behind. In the end, William's decision did not simply change Harry's access to Balmoral. It changed the meaning of belonging inside the royal family. The locked gate became a verdict on trust, memory, and consequence. Harry was left speechless because he understood the truth at last. Some doors do not close with anger. They close with sorrow, duty, and the knowledge that nothing will return exactly as it was. Harry accepted the final truth slowly. His unrestricted private access to Balmoral was over, and every future visit now had to pass through William's office. William's office meant the team that manages the prince's official duties, approvals, and royal responsibilities. That mattered because Harry was no longer walking through old family memory. He was walking through permission. The change did not erase him, but it changed his place. William accepted his own burden in silence. The prince knew the monarchy would present the move as protection of private royal space, family security, and institutional stability. Institutional stability meant keeping the crown steady during moments that could shake public trust. That mattered, because Balmoral was more than land. It was one of the family's most private shelters, and if trust broke there, nothing inside royal life would feel fully safe again. Harry understood that Balmoral could no longer belong to him the way it once had. He could still remember the boy he had been there, but memory did not open the gate anymore. That was the wound. Not a lost room, not a missed visit, a lost freedom. Harry had spoken through many storms before, but this time, silence became his answer. The place that once felt like home had become a reminder that belonging can change without warning. William understood the cost of being the brother who closed that gate. The future king had not acted with joy. He had acted with the cold pain of leadership, where protecting one thing often means hurting someone else. The prince had gained authority, but he had lost another piece of brotherhood. Success stood beside suffering, and neither cancelled the other. Charles saw the deeper meaning before anyone said it aloud. The king understood that this decision marked a generational transfer of authority, from his wounded fatherhood to William's future kingship. Generational transfer meant power moving from one royal era to the next. Charles could grieve as a father, but the future now belonged to the son who had made the final call. The monarch knew the crown had shifted. Catherine's quiet support confirmed the emotional truth behind the decision. The princess did not push revenge. She stood behind a boundary drawn around the monarchy's most fragile private world. Catherine understood that love without trust could not protect Balmoral. William understood it too. And Harry, painfully, finally understood why the gate had closed. This moment meant Harry had not been erased. He had been repositioned. Balmoral remained part of his past, not his unrestricted future. For William, it proved he was no longer only a brother. He was becoming the guardian of the crown's most sacred spaces. There is no softer ending to this chapter. Balmoral stayed standing, the gate stayed closed, and the royal family moved forward, with one truth carved into silence: love may remember, but trust decides who enters. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.